Hello, my name's Erin, welcome to my channel. If you haven't seen any of my videos so far, my channel's basically following along my health and fitness journey. Not just physical health, but mental is important as well. Today's video is about seeing a therapist. Now, I know that there's a lot of stigma about seeing a therapist. A lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it or anything like that, but I think there's absolutely no shame in admitting when you need help. I remember one time someone told me very publicly that the best investment they'd ever made in themselves was seeing a therapist. Apparently they didn't have anything huge, any trauma that they needed to work through, but they felt that just on a daily basis it really helped process their feelings and kept them healthier all round. They said that in public very loudly. They had absolutely no shame, and at this particular point in my life I did have a lot of shame. I had been avoiding seeing a therapist for years. I thought it meant that I was weak and I couldn't get through things myself. I thought it meant that they would insist that I had to go on antidepressants or something like that. My experience has not been like that at all, so I would like to talk about that today. So even if this video can just help one person, I consider that so incredibly worth it. I've seen a therapist 3 times now. I've been going once a month, and each time has been so different, and I can't even begin to explain how much I've gained from it just so far. Just having someone, a professional, to talk to about what I've been through, my feelings and how I'm processing it, even if it's something that you may not even consider to be that bad. I mean, I think the way that we look at our lives is so relative. There are people who have it a lot harder than I do, and I know that, but that doesn't mean that my problems don't feel real to me. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't gain help with the way I'm feeling. And I really hope that if you're watching this, then maybe you can realize that as well. Just because there are people with bigger problems don't mean that yours don't matter, and it doesn't mean that you should downplay it. So I'm sure that this is different from country to country, but I live in Australia, so I'm going to talk about what it meant for me to get an appointment in the first place. So, in Australia we have something called Medicare, which is our national healthcare system. People still have private health insurance, which helps in other ways, but Medicare comes out of our taxes basically, and it's everyone working together towards a healthier future. God. So I booked an appointment with my GP, and I told my GP that I thought I needed therapy. So I was given this mental health assessment, I guess, where I had to rate how I was feeling, and it measured depression, it measured anxiety, and it measured stress. So I don't know what would have happened if I scored low in one of these areas or something, but I didn't. So I was referred to see a therapist. Now, without going to a GP, you can still book a therapy appointment, but it means, I think, that you won't necessarily get the full Medicare rebate. So you'll pay completely out of pocket, I believe. But that probably varies from therapist to therapist, so maybe ask before you book an appointment. But I do recommend going through your GP. So I did this assessment, I booked my session. I could have gone through a bulk billing practice. I chose not to. I chose to go towards like a middle tier paid therapist. So I called them, I booked my session, I went in, I paid just over $200, and then I immediately got my Medicare rebate back, like less than 2 minutes later, which meant that in the end I only paid about $80. So my first session was just my therapist getting to know me, asked about my life, what I had been through, what I wanted to achieve from therapy. I found it really helpful before my first session to really sit down and think about what I wanted to gain from these sessions, because, well, I don't want them to be wasted. So I made that very abundantly clear to him about what I wanted to gain, and I kind of left it in his hands to figure out how to get there. Maybe you're more in tune with yourself than I am. I needed help figuring out how to get there, but my partner, for instance, had some ideas about what he would need in order to achieve certain goals psychologically. So yeah, we just sat down and talked about my life experiences. If you decide to go through a paid psychologist like I did some research online about my local clinics, and I decided to have a look at who would be most suited to me. And when I went into my GP appointment, I told my GP that I had these preferences of psychologists. So I do recommend doing that if you can afford to pay. If you can't, then as far as I'm aware, you just have to take the bulk billing psychologist who is closest to you. I mean, end of the day, all of these people have to have degrees to do what they're doing. They're not just people off the street. So I'm sure that even through a bulk billing psychologist, you're still in good hands. Towards the end of the first session, based on what the psychologist has heard, because I wanted to see progress really quickly, I guess, I asked the psychologist what he'd recommend. So he gave me a couple of things to work on, to really focus on, a few choices that I needed to make before my next session in a month from then. I don't even remember what they were, but one of them was really think about the kind of relationship that I want to have with someone who I've in the past had a troubled relationship with. But that's just an example. That's just an example of what he thought was appropriate for me, so you might be completely different. Now the problem I found I had is that by the time I got out of the session, because you know your emotions are running quite high, you're probably feeling quite charged, is that I forgot them. So from my second session onwards, I've been making a little list in my phone as he's been telling me so I don't forget them. So as I said, I've had 2 sessions since. Both times he's referred back to his notes, he's remembered most of what I've told him. He's a trained professional. He knows what's important and what to take down and what to remember, so I trust him with that. And we've just gone through and dug a little bit deeper into things I've talked about in the past. He's checked in and said, how's this particular thing going? What do you think about this? Did you get that promotion at work? Etc, etc. All the things that could have been on my mind between then and now. If there's anything that's sprung up between since the last appointment that I really feel like I need to get out in the open. So for example, if I was to have a bit of a meltdown or something, then I would record that to make sure that I told him that in the next session, so we could talk about why and how I can battle that in the future. I said at the beginning of the video that I was nervous that I would be told I needed to go on antidepressants or something. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I really wanted to see if I could learn to deal with my problems organically before resorting to that, but if it's recommended that I do look at antidepressants or something like that, I will absolutely do it. Being on antidepressants or something doesn't mean that you can't deal with it or that you're weak or anything like that. It means that there's a chemical imbalance in your body. I'm not a trained professional, but if there's not a chemical imbalance in my body and it's just emotional things that I need to work through personally, I would rather just do that. So I felt really comfortable the entire time I'm talking about things. I've never felt pushed. I've never felt therapized, I guess. He really does just listen, but at the same time too, I think it's important to note that the psychologist doesn't just listen. As I said, I'm given recommendations. He knows the things to talk through and stuff like that. On certain things as well where I'm a bit confused about why I'm feeling a certain way, he'll talk it through with me and we'll brainstorm a little bit together to figure out exactly what's going in my head and why I'm reacting in a certain way, which I found very beneficial. I've really appreciated that. So not only have I been getting my feelings and thoughts out in the open, I've been understanding them as well. So when I know I have a session coming up, like I said earlier, I tend to write things down as they happen. Throughout the month, I will write down anything that's been specifically on my mind, and I will just make sure that I arrive a little bit early at the clinic. I leave work a little bit earlier on those days, and I just take a moment to just relax and make sure I'm well hydrated and everything like that. I'm aware that $80 is a lot of money, so I want to make sure I get as much as I can out of it. So I make sure I'm completely relaxed, in a good headspace, and I really recommend you try this as well. There's nothing wrong with going to therapy, even if you just need someone to talk to. Maybe you don't have an appropriate friend or family member, and that's totally fine. There is nothing shameful about getting help. We all need help. The only thing that's changed in between 50 years ago and now is that we feel more comfortable talking about it. That's not entirely true, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I don't know why there's this stigma around mental health. Maybe it's because it's a fairly new concept, but there's nothing wrong with getting help. You don't have to tell anyone, you don't have to be like me and broadcast it on the internet, but it's nothing shameful about it, and it's so sad. We're more than happy to go to the gym and work on ourselves, but why don't we do that with our minds? Why don't we do that with our brains? It's not that we're nervous or ashamed of going to the gym, we're proud of it. We should make that the same with working through things psychologically as well. It shouldn't be a point of shame, you shouldn't be hiding it. But if this just helps one person about your expectations for therapy, as I said, I've never felt therapized, I've never felt like an experiment or anything like that. I've always felt like an equal human being, and I really hope that I can inspire one person to get help if they need it. If you liked this video, like and subscribe. I'm uploading every week about my health and fitness journey, and I'll see you next time. Bye!